Hello creeps! Andy here. And the last video that I filmed, an interesting topic came up about if I thought that a horror villain was justified in their actions. And so I thought that this would be an interesting video to make, so that's what we're doing today. Some of these are, I feel like, are completely justified in that they're fictional characters. I don't obviously justify anybody harming anybody. It's just for a fun video, relax. Some of these I feel like are justified, some not so much. Some I think are more complex topics. So I thought that this would be an interesting video to make and to just discuss back and forth. Let me know which ones you agree with, disagree with, and which ones I forgot, because I know that there probably are a lot of horror villains that people feel are more justified than others. So let me know down below. So I made a list of various movies and we're just gonna get into it. So the first one, Hellraiser. The Cenobites, are they justified? Hell yeah. I think that they are probably the most justified that I can think of on this list for several reasons. One, is it messed up that the family gets involved and that they get hurt and that their lives change forever because of this? Yeah, obviously it sucks. But they don't just show up and wreak havoc. You have to call to them. You have to ask them to come. I think that the Cenobites are completely justified because that's what they do. I think that they're not the horror villains in this movie. I think Frank and Julia are the horror villains because, one, Frank is just deceitful, he's manipulative, he uses everyone to get what he wants, and Julia, because she actually does kill other people in order to bring Frank back for this like delusional idea that they're in love. So I think that Julia and Frank are the horror villains in Hellraiser. I don't even think the Cenobites are. Yeah, I think they're justified. Lead Cenobite, you go get him. You guys know from the last video that I love the lead Cenobite, so I think I will always be on his side. Next up, let's go to the ruins. This is an interesting one because I have seen a lot of people say that they don't like the ruins, the book or the movie, because they feel like the indigenous people are the bad people. And I've seen this from people written it online, I've heard it in real life conversations, and I've also seen it in my comments. So I thought this would be an interesting one to touch on. I disagree. I don't think that the indigenous people are the bad people. I think that they're the heroes of the entire book and movie. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be giving away a lot of plot points when I discuss a lot of these, so just keep that in mind moving forward. So for the ruins, the indigenous people have taken it upon themselves to not let people escape from the ruins. And it has nothing to do with their race or religion or anything. It just has to do if they touch the ruins. They're all from different countries. They all have different backgrounds. It's just like we have to protect the world. We have to protect this land. Even in the movie, I don't think this is in the book, but even in the movie, one of their young children gets exposed to the ruins and they even kill the kid. So it has nothing to do with who touches it, but I think that they are the heroes. Obviously, I think that the ruins are supposed to be the main villain of the film, but I think that the indigenous people are absolutely justified in what they did. They're there to save not only the area, but the entire world. If this thing got out, it would take over everything. Let me know what you guys think. Next up, let's talk about Jaws. So a few videos ago, there was a comment saying that it's the mayor that's actually the villain in Jaws and not the shark. I completely agree with that. It's definitely the people who run the town, who profit off of the tourism. They're the ones that don't want to shut down the beach, even though they know a shark is on the loose and it is killing people. So yeah, 100% the villains of this movie are definitely the humans that prioritize monetary value over humans' lives. Do I think that the shark is justified? So here's the thing. I mean, yeah, we're going into its territory. I don't know that it's justified in that it's like this mindless man-eating shark with a vengeance. You know what I mean? So even this one's a little complicated. I'm not like, yes, go Jaws and shark, eat everybody. That's not how I feel. But I do think that maybe the perspective should be switched a little bit and we should be blaming the people who run the town as opposed to the shark. Next up is the Purge. So this one is obviously complex because on one hand, I do agree with the concept in a fictional world that if the purge is legal and two consenting people go out into it, whatever happens, happens, you knew the consequences. Like I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with that. However, I think the Purge movies do complicate things a little bit more because they have people go after people who are trying to stay in their homes in the earlier films, and then obviously in the later films the heavy focus on the socioeconomic differences and how the poor are negatively affected and kind of baited out and used as hunting tools for the rich. Like, obviously none of that is justifiable, but just the basic level of a purge, that I'm like, yeah, there's nothing inherently wrong about that, but I think the movies do complicate things. That's how I feel about that one. Next one, It Follows. Here's the thing with this one. Me and my husband very much so disagree on this. He thinks that if you get this, whatever it is, curse, we'll call it, that you should just be the one that copes with it. And I don't necessarily think that that's true. It wasn't given to you with consent. I mean, ideally in a perfect world, my idea is you would have two consenting people who live on the opposite side of the country or the world or whatever, and you would know how much time this thing takes to get to each person, and every 6 months, year, however long it is, you fly over and you do it on each coast. That's obviously not taking into account that the director said that this thing can get on an airplane and fly, which I think logically doesn't really make that much sense. And I feel like to make sense in my head, it would have to just kind of walk in a straight line from point A to point B. And also, I know a lot of people think that this is a metaphor for an STD, so I'm obviously not saying like, yeah, go out and spread it. But that's not the way that I interpreted the film at all. I don't know, what do you guys think? It's such a shitty situation, and even if you were to pass it on as quickly as possible, you always in the back of your head have to be worried that it's gonna come back to you. I don't know. This movie freaks me out. The more that I think about it, and the just like the idea of never being safe, that gives me so much anxiety. So yeah, I don't know. This one obviously is a little bit more complex, but also I think that in the beginning you think like, oh, that boy is terrible, I can't believe what he did to her. But then once you start to understand everything, it's like, well, what other option do you have? And even when she starts passing it on, you're like, yeah, get rid of it. So I don't know, is it justified? This one's a little complicated. Next one that I want to talk about, oh, Frankenstein. Okay, let's talk about Frankenstein's monster for a minute. First of all, there's a big difference between the movie and the book, so I do feel differently about both. But let's talk about the movie first, and then we'll touch on the book. Frankenstein's monster, I don't think is the villain in the movie. I think Frankenstein is the villain. And here's why. Because he makes this creature, right? He treats it poorly. It obviously doesn't have the cognitive ability to understand what's going on. It has the mind of a criminal, the body of various people, but it's not taught anything. If anything, it's just threatened with fire, locked in a room, neglected. And of course it's gonna be, I mean, anybody would be mad if that happened to them. So the thing that bothers me about Frankenstein is that during the entire movie, there are no repercussions for his actions. He doesn't go to the town and say, guys, I really fucked up. I made this monster, and now he's going around and wreaking havoc on the town. He's just like, oh, there's a monster, grab your pitchforks. And there's nothing that happens to him that's bad in the movie, but his family's fine, everyone's fine, the town ends up being fine. And I also don't think that it's the monster's intent to be evil. I think that when he does harm the little girl, they're throwing flowers in the water and he's like, oh, this is fun. And then he's like, oh, this might be fun. And then chucks her in the water too. There's no malicious intent behind what he does. He's just existing in a form that he doesn't understand because he shouldn't be there in the first place. I think Frankenstein's monster is definitely misunderstood in that sense, and I think that Frankenstein is the villain in the movie. However, in the book, I think it's different because Frankenstein's monster is aware, he can speak, he can communicate, he understands life and death. Obviously, he's still brought into the world not knowing a lot of things. And honestly, if you guys haven't read the book, Frankenstein's monster is kind of the first incel. He's pissed off he exists, everyone thinks he's a monster, and he can't like live in society because everyone's scared of him. So he's like, if you don't make me a girlfriend, I'm gonna destroy your entire life. And because Frankenstein has seen the destruction that the monster has caused thus far, he refuses, and then this monster just hunts him and makes his life miserable. And so in that sense, I think that Frankenstein's monster is more of a monster. I mean, obviously it's still complex, but what I'm saying is comparing the two, I think the movie, he's less of a villain, and in the book, he's more of a villain. Let's see if there's any other ones. Ooh. The Last House on the Left. This one is hard because so obviously the villains of the movie are the outsiders, and they're not justified in anything that they do. But I wanted to touch on the parents because I don't think that there's anybody who watches The Last House on the Left who thinks that the parents do anything wrong. Like, they're all for it, you know, like they hurt your daughter, blow up his head in a microwave. So it's interesting the way that the victim changes in this film and how we feel that one perpetrator isn't justified and the other is. So this one I just wanted to talk about because I thought that it was an interesting concept. All of these are complex because, like, what is the right thing to do? Obviously, blowing up someone's head in the microwave probably isn't my number one choice, but also, yeah, they're justified in what they do, right? Like an eye for an eye kind of thing. This is kind of a messed up video to make now that I'm thinking about it, but let's talk Ben Willis from I Know What You Did Last Summer. So he's obviously the villain in the movie. Is he justified in his actions? One, I do understand the need to pay someone back, like an eye for an eye, like we were talking about before, but is what happened to him worth waiting a year, making a plan of attack, slowly making these people think they're going crazy and then knocking them off one by one? I don't know. I think Ben Willis took it a little too far. I think he needs to maybe relax a little bit. But also I just feel like there's a lot of innocent bystanders in this movie that get hurt for no reason. And so I don't think that he's justified in that sense. Even if he were justified in harming these 4 people, he only got 2 out of 4. That's a 50-50 success rate. That's not very good. And then he harms all these other, side characters that didn't really do anything. Next up, let's talk Carrie. So Carrie is obviously seen as the villain a lot of the time. I don't want to say that she's justified in her actions because she's not, but I think that altering our perspective on who the actual real villain in the movie is, because her mother is obviously the villain. Her mother neglects her, tortures her. Oh my gosh, the things that she says and does to Carrie, it's like her mother pushes her to the edge and the kids at school push her off. I don't think that she's justified in what she does, and I think that the whole movie and book in itself is like a cautionary tale of bullying. But I also do think that maybe her mother should be seen as the villain more so than Carrie. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about Carrie? This one's hard. Do you guys see Carrie as the villain or do you see her mom as the villain? Oh, and then let's touch on Jigsaw for 1 second really quickly. Here's the thing is, like, I understand his motive and I understand that he finds it unfair that his life is being cut short and these people aren't living their lives to his standards. But I also don't agree with the fact that he gets to play God and choose who lives and who doesn't. And although he is testing them to see the extent at which they would fight for their lives, I still don't think a lot of the things that he does are easy enough for them to escape. And I think it's more than just like, yeah, I want to live, I'm going to do this. It's just torture. And a lot of the times they have to choose their lives over other people's lives, and that adds a whole nother level of moral dilemma. I don't think Jigsaw is justified in what he does. I think that the intent behind it is understandable, but I think he needs to chill out a little bit. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about this video. What villains do you think are justified? What aren't? Which ones did I forget? Let me know how you feel, and I will see you soon with another horror video. Bye, guys.